Hello and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here as always to talk about mind-body issues, mind-body symptoms. And what do I mean by that? I usually like to start there no matter what, even though a lot of you are coming back as repeat viewers. There are going to be people who are tuning in for the first time and they don't know. So a mind-body condition is when you have something going on in your mind that leads to a change in your body. And in a way, if you think about it, we have this every day, all the time. That's what crying is. That's what blushing is. But what happens when something that's going on in the mind becomes a different process in the body that continues? Well, that's what I experienced. I bent over to tie my shoes one day many, many years ago. It was now 21 years ago or something like that. And I bent over to tie my shoes, and boom, I suddenly had a kind of tweaked back. At the time, I thought, oh, well, okay, it'll get better. But it didn't. So a lot of what I work with is when these symptoms don't get better, when they don't change, and when we seem to be stuck in the same spot. That's a big part of what I work on. The reality is, thankfully, we can get control of a lot of these conditions if we understand what's happening in our minds and if we change what's happening in our minds. But how do we do that? We need to change what's happening in our minds by getting a handle on our understanding of things. Your mind's not going to change if nothing changes. If nobody's giving you new inputs into how to think, nothing's going to change. Well, that's a big part of what I do, is provide ways of thinking about things that are completely different. This will change how your mind is taking things in and sitting with things, and this will change what happens then in your physiology. Now, let's talk a little bit about my system, and then we're going to get to questions that people have. As I worked to get better, one thing that I found out is, well, one thing that I really came to is the fact that nothing was going to change if my mind wasn't going to change, just like what I told you. But that meant I needed to get my questions answered. And I had thousands of questions. And at the beginning, I was like, I don't know who can answer these. I don't even know that they can be answered. Even before I figured out that there was a mind-body process going on, I had all kinds of questions, but they just weren't getting answered. The very first time I really started getting questions answered was when Dr. John Sarno's books were recommended to me. And I started understanding there really is a mind-body process going on here. That was before I even got relief. But I started to say, Dr. Sarno is the first person whose answers are actually making sense. Now, his answers didn't make sense of everything. I love Dr. Sarno, but there's ways in which I've extended the work that he does because I found that I wasn't getting the full answers that I needed. So that's where my system came into play. I just found that no matter what help was out there, it wasn't making full sense to me. And I went after getting my questions answered. I got them answered in various ways. I got them answered from certain books. I got them answered from Sarno. I got them answered when I sat down with one of the therapists that trained under Dr. Sarno, Eric Sherman, and I asked him all kinds of questions. But the bottom line is you've got to get your questions answered to your full satisfaction. That is why I do this Q&A. I do more than the Q&A. I'll get into that in a second. But I knew there needed to be outlets for people to ask their questions and get them answered. And the reason for that is if you don't get your questions answered, they just swim around in your head and you will stay in the same place, but they are answerable. So we're going to get to those questions in a second, but let me talk a little bit about my system, especially for people who are relatively new to this. I have something called the column system, or the 3-column system. And where did I get this from? What I got it from is that when I started working with people, I understood that it wasn't just emotions that change what goes on in your physiology, which is a large part of what Sarno talks about. Sarno also talked about accepting the diagnosis. And really, in many ways, what he's talking about is that your thinking has to change. So I took that idea much further. I even took the emotions idea further. And then I found a third component, which was that once I changed how I was thinking about my feelings or how I was processing my feelings, and once I changed what the thinking actually was, I started to become very powerful. And what I realized is that wasn't an accident. That wasn't just incidental. That's something we can harness. So there are 3 ways we can engage with symptoms. And when I sit down with people, or this actually is not something I do so much anymore, but when I first started sitting down with people, I would tell them to take out a sheet of paper and divide it into 3 columns. Because we were going to work on 3 different kinds of mind-body problems. So let's get into what those are. In the emotions column, you're dealing with the onsets and upticks in symptoms. Those are caused by emotional life and usually emotions that you're not aware of. Sarno talked about this. He was 100% right. But I have ways of accessing what are those emotions so that it's not just think about how you feel or just journal about it. I have a very specific way of dealing with that and finding ways to unearth what those emotions are so that you can actually access whatever the emotion is and get rid of the acute onset or uptick in symptoms. When symptoms stay there, it's because of your thinking. So I also have a system of how to deal with what I call doubt. This is the doubt column. The emotions column is for those acute onsets and upticks. The doubt column is for the ones that seem to be chronic. Nothing is chronic, though. As I say it, it is consistently acute. That means it is always there, but it is breakable in any given second. That string of thoughts is breakable if you think about it differently. That's what the doubt column is for. There's a whole process within that I can lay out. In the power column, it is about plateaus where you are getting better, but something's just kind of stuck. And it's usually because of a conflict with the self that I also have a system for figuring out what that is, how you can live in a more powerful way and become freer. So you've got 3 different reasons for symptoms. One is the emotions, and that leads to those acute onsets and upticks. If you address that, that gets better. The thinking, if it stays in the same place, that seems to be chronic. That's what I call consistently acute. That doesn't change. But if you address it, that gets better. If you're stuck on a kind of plateau or some kind of conflict with yourself, the power column can address that and you can get better. The columns not only address these 3 different issues, but they also help you recognize which issue is at hand at any given moment. So they're very organizing, and that's what I needed. So I'm giving you all everything that I felt that I needed, and hopefully that's helpful. A lot of people have said that it is. Hopefully it could be helpful to you if you're just checking this out. And we're going to get right to the questions now. Okay. Rita, I want to say hi. Thank you for saying hi here. Catherine Toomer, thanks for joining us on Instagram as well. And Dorisa says, hi, Dan and everyone. Let me put that up on the screen. Thank you so much, Dorisa. Good to see you. Okay, Lynn, thank you for your patience with this question. Lynn says, what are your thoughts on using visualization? Okay, so first I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are on everything. Whatever you're going to do, I want it to give you more of a sense that you're going to get better. I want it to build towards certainty. I want it to bring down doubt. So visualization can be useful for some people. But here's the thing. It's going to be useful for some people and not others. And it's going to be useful for some people at certain moments and not others. So let's first back up because there may be some people watching this and are wondering, what is visualization in the first place? Well, visualization, as I understand your question, Lynn, make sure that I'm representing this well, is when we envision feeling better or envision some kind of change or envision ourselves being able to handle something. What that does is it allows you to almost preview your future and make a future in your mind. And that actually does allow you to go there. This is a very interesting study that I just discovered recently. They did a study. I'm from Cleveland, actually. This was done at the Cleveland Clinic, where people imagined flexing their finger muscles and their elbows. 2 different, ways of studying it. They wanted to study the fingers, they wanted to study the elbows, just to have 2 different ways of studying this. And they had a group that just visualized doing it. They didn't actually do it, didn't move a muscle, but they visualized doing it. And guess what? Their actual strength in their fingers and their elbows increased simply from visualizing. They didn't move a muscle, and their actual strength in their fingers and elbows got better. Think about what that means. What it means is the power of the mind is huge. So, Lynn, when you say, what are your thoughts on visualization? The first thing I'll say is the power of the mind is hugely powerful. But I don't want you then to think that you need to visualize to get better, because it's not about that. It's about whether your mind changes or not. Visualization is just a tool. It works for some people. In fact, there are certain athletes who visualize performing, and that helps them. But listen, it's the opposite when we worry about something. We are visualizing it a lot of the times. Sometimes it's not purely visual. It's just kind of imagining it. But sometimes it's actually visualizing it. And if we're going to a negative space, that doesn't help us. So the real question, Lynn, is what's going to help you in a given moment? So I would encourage you, let's try it out. Let's think of it as a tool to be tried out. But if it brings down doubt, it helps. If it makes doubt go up, that could be problematic. In fact, it will be problematic. We always want to have things bring down doubt. Okay, Jazz Sax Sailor, I want to say hi to you here. It looked like you were requesting to be live on video. I actually can't do that on Instagram. If you want to come do it on YouTube, I actually believe there is a way to do it, but I'll have to figure that out because it's actually been a while. But I do hope that if you have a question, you let me know. Okay, and welcome. All right, Catherine Toomer has a question on Instagram. Hi, Dr. Dan. It seems that sometimes I'm more likely to have symptoms when the days ahead are looking a bit bleak. Lots of work without play, no soulmate to talk to, boredom, feeling too cold. The month of November tends to do that to people, which is coming up soon. And then Catherine says, is that normal? That she has, and so I'm going to back up and just sum that up. She's asking, it seems that sometimes I'm more likely to have symptoms when the days ahead are looking bleak. Is that normal? The answer to that is definitely yes, but I'll explain why. For example, is it normal that I would feel undervalued, more sensitive to the comments of others, one of my symptoms, because I am cold or bored? Or is there more to be understood? I'm thinking that maybe I still connect these difficult feelings like cold or boredom are still connected in my brain with being an imperfect person. Okay, very interesting, Catherine. I'm going to give you my feedback, but as always, when I answer a question, if I don't answer it to your full satisfaction, or if it leaves you with other questions, you've got to keep asking questions. Otherwise, you will stay in the same mindset, and I don't want that for you. So you, plural, whether it's Catherine or anybody, keep asking your questions. So here's the thing I'm thinking, Catherine. It doesn't really have to do with being cold or bored per se. What it has to do with is, this is actually similar to what we were talking about with Lynn and visualization. This is almost you projecting yourself into the future. Essentially, what's happening is whatever your mindset is, it affects your body. So if you're not feeling good, your body starts to not feel good in some way. And it's very, very common for people to get colds even around this time of year. And doctors will tell you over and over, it's not true that cold weather causes colds. That they're right about that. It doesn't. But here's what does. Our belief that we're going to get colds, that can actually lower the immune system and make those germs more likely to come in and give us an actual cold. So cold weather actually does, in a way, potentially cause colds, but only because of what we believe. So the main thing I want you to think about, Catherine, is that these kind of drearier months or, feeling bleak in any way, whatever the bleakness comes from, is more likely to give you symptoms. Doesn't matter whether you're cold or bored, but it does matter whether you're feeling good in some capacity. So I will add to this, though, because you do have another question about it. You were connecting coldness or boredom with being an imperfect person. It could be that you have an association to those feelings and they feel like they reinforce that feeling. But what I want you to stay focused on is, how are you feeling in your life with you? Because that's what's going to determine what your mindset's like. And that's what's going to determine what happens in your body. Let's start there, Catherine, and let me know if that made sense to you. Okay? Boutique Beast Hoof. I love that name. Thank you for joining us here. Please do let me know if you have questions. And if you're coming in the middle and you're wondering what I'm talking about, we're talking about mind-body symptoms, how the mind can create actual symptoms in the body, my system of how to work with that, which is called the column system. You can learn about this on my website. It's www.crushingdoubt.org. Of course, you can learn about it straight from me right here. But on the website, there are some valuable resources available to you. So let's say it's the middle of the night and you really want to finally make some progress. You're sick of these symptoms and I'm not having an event or you can't reach me directly yet. There are things that you can access on this website. One is my teaching seminars. These are 8 sessions. They're 75 minutes long each. And these 8 modules will teach you everything you need to know about what goes on in mind-body experience. Why did I do this? Remember, my goal is to bring down doubt. My goal is to have this all make sense. And if it's going to make sense, then I got to give you the tools for it to make sense. Well, the teaching seminars do that. They lay out everything about why the mind body issue is the way that it is, why it's likely that many, many symptoms, if not most of them, come from mind body experience. They iron out certain contradictions, even within the mind body community. Why does this person say this and this person say this? There's a lot of information in that, and you can get that on the website. Then I built membership groups where people could actually come on a Zoom call. It's kind of similar to this, but has some distinct advantages. People come on a Zoom call and they can ask me questions just like this, but there's a lot more give and take in the moment, so we can get much further in any sitting. There's even some people here tonight who are in the groups. They may be able to chime in and tell you what's valuable about it, but they will tell you we can get a lot further in a smaller time because I can ask you, wait, what did you mean by that? Hey, did you notice that word? There's so many, it's like we're answering multiple questions at once. In the meantime, you learn from watching other people go through that experience with me. And so the full time, whether you're talking or not, is valuable. That can be accessed on the website too. We meet 3 times a week. You can meet once, twice, or 3 times a week, depending on what level you want to join. Those are Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and the times are always the same. So if you want to find out more about it, you can also email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. All right, we've got a question coming in from Karen Isaacs. Karen, good to see you here. Okay, Karen says, missing tonight's group, visiting with my new grandson. Last night, my husband and his son had a screaming fight. I was envious that they can both scream, get it out. I was feeling okay, then constant sneezing. Okay, so this is interesting. There are times where I'll need to go back and I'll either need to read it again or have you say it again. And here's why. Because the language of the body is a true language. And so sometimes you need to think about, now, wait, what's being said? So I'm reading Karen's words. I understand the words, but I have to go back and look at the symptoms and say, how did they operate here? Okay, so she went to visit her new grandson. Her husband and son had a screaming fight. She felt envious about it. She was feeling okay. And then suddenly constant sneezing. Okay. So Karen, this probably won't surprise you. You're pretty well versed in this, but I want to run through it anyway, not just for you, but for everybody who's watching. The first thing that I'll say about it is this sounds like an emotions column symptom because there was a sudden onset. So remember, the columns, there's 3 columns. Thankfully, only 3 of them, and they're very organizing, but they tell you what type of symptom you're having based on what's happening. If it's a sudden onset, there's only 2 reasons for a sudden onset. An emotions column symptom where some feeling came up that you weren't aware of, or what I call a doubt trigger, where something in the environment got you worried about something, and then the symptom gets elevated. I'm not hearing anything about a trigger like a movement or an event or a physical experience that led you to feel that way. For instance, if you screamed and then you had suddenly completely lost your voice and felt that it was damaged, that would be a doubt trigger. There's nothing going on like that here, so we're going to go straight for the emotions. You say, I was feeling okay, then constant sneezing. Now, here's another clue. Not only that it is an emotions column issue, but it's a clue about the specifics of this emotions column issue. Okay? And that is that the nature of the symptom usually is expressing the nature of the feeling. So, sneezing. What is sneezing? Sneezing is essentially an irritation. It's not major. Let's take this as an example. If we're comparing sneezing to back spasms, those are very different symptoms, and they're expressing very different things. Back spasms tend to cause major fear. They cause the fear, but they also come from fear. There's an expectation that this is going to be scary. And so the symptom can often be expressing the very feeling it is hiding. With sneezing, it should be a minor irritation. It's really interesting, but as soon as I recognize that most of my sneezing, the vast majority of my sneezing, happens when I'm irritated, first of all, I stopped sneezing so much. And secondly, I recognized many, many cases where I sneezed and I thought, oh, you know what? I actually was really irritated right there. And I started to see the connection between the emotions and your symptoms. This is a big part of what we do in the columns, is to see the connection between something and your symptoms. If you can see that connection, that's when you can get control of it. So Karen, what I'd want you to think about here is, well, what were you irritated about? It could be that you're irritated about having this envy, that they get to scream and you don't. That could be it. It also could be that you were irritated that they were screaming, that they weren't, doing a better job or whatever. I'm not saying that critically of anyone, but I want you to think about, what was I irritated about? It's an emotions column issue. This, by the way, is as pretty much anything that we look at is going to be, it's a good example of how the columns work. Every time I look at a problem, I think, which column is the predominant one? And that's where I go and do the work. So here, it was emotions column because it was an onset or an uptick. I went straight for it. Now we just got to get to the specifics of it, and you actually could help yourself with that. Okay, Sylvia Sierra, good to see you. It's been a while. Good to see your face in the picture and to see your name. So welcome back. All right, Jane Smith says, "Hi, Dr. Dan and Dorisa and everyone. Thanks again for being here for us today. It is my pleasure, Jane. Thank you so much for being here with us." Okay, then Jane says, "I'm confused about what to do when I'm in a tension-inducing situation, example, driving, overstimulating social interactions, and my pain gets worse." Okay. I'm gonna kind of walk you through how I would think about this, Jane, if I were in your shoes, which of course I have been. I've been in situations where it was a tension-inducing situation and my pain got worse. And by the way, that is not so. I want to make sure I'm not being confusing about that. I don't mean the pain that I had when I had 8 years of back pain. That was stuff that was always there, and then I was able to break through once the thinking changed. Okay, I'm talking about kind of feelings that come and go. And Jane, what you're describing is more of an emotions column kind of issue, because remember, it's onsets and upticks. So similar to what I was talking about with Karen, this is another emotions column situation. So when you say you're confused about what to do, I think there's a couple things going on. First of all, you're having an emotions column symptom that starts the symptom, but then doubt comes and piles on. Remember, confusion is a form of doubt. So Jane, what's happening here is that doubt is seizing this moment of an emotional uptick and saying, ooh, now I got her on the ropes. I can get her confused. I can start to say things to her. And I don't know if this is the kind of thing that your doubt is saying to you, Jane, but you might end up finding that it says something to you like, well, yes, you're bothered by the situation, but there's nothing you can do about the situation. You've got to keep driving, or you've got to keep going on the interaction, or you've got to behave yourself, or whatever. All those you've got tos are going to make you feel locked into the situation. And that's what doubt wants to do. So let's review. The emotion started this, and then the doubt comes in trying to say, this is really bad. This is hopeless, or it's confusing, or something. So when you say you're confused about what to do, the very first thing you always do is, if doubt is there, bring down the doubt. So I want you to do what we do in the doubt column. Now, this is review for a lot of people who've already been following me, talking to me, and learning about my process, but especially for people who are new. In the doubt column, we do three things: observe, articulate, and counter. Observing a doubt means to call it into question, to recognize it as a doubt, because otherwise we might even say the words as if we're just saying a doubt. But if we think it's actually true, that's not observing a doubt. That's having the doubt. Observing the doubt is to recognize the thought, but be very much calling it into question. That's what observing doubt is. You have to very much call it into question. If you're not doing that, you're not observing the doubt. You're just having it. Then we move on to articulating the doubt. Put it into words. What's being said here? So in this situation, Jane, first of all, I'm observing the doubt for you. You might not have seen it as doubt, but now I'm saying to you, hey, look at that. Start to think of it as doubt, right? So I've observed it for you. Now you can observe it as well. Now we're going to get it articulated. We have to figure out, what are you maybe saying to yourself? Maybe you're saying to yourself, I'm in a situation that I can't change, and so I'm just stuck. Okay, now that's an articulated doubt. Once it's put into words, that allows us to counter. Countering is where you use science or logic. Sometimes it's the words of others. Sometimes it can come from me, but something that goes against that doubt, that argues back with that articulated doubt. So let's say it was, I'm stuck in this situation and nothing can change. I'd want you to challenge that and say, now, wait a minute. Yes, I'm in this situation, but that doesn't mean I'm stuck in the same situation all the time. I could make changes. I could get out of here if I want to, or I could change the subject if I want to, or if I'm not liking this particular person I'm interacting with, I could go start interacting with somebody else. What's happening there, Jane, is the emotions column, the emotions started this symptom. Then doubt came in, and you got to deal with doubt first. But because doubt came in, your power also sank. Okay. So tracing it back, just go in reverse order. Bring down the doubt, then get to the emotions. Okay. The fact that the power sank, you'll get to that last. The power column is the last of the three columns to be addressed. It's where everything flows towards. But first conquer doubt, then check your emotions column, then you can move over to power. And I wouldn't even worry about it in this scenario, Jane. What I want you to do is bring down the doubt by recognizing it, observe it, articulate it. Then we can counter it. Then you can go back and figure out, just like I was saying with Karen, what is the emotion of this moment? Because that can actually take away the symptom. But you're not going to be able to take away symptoms if doubt is there. Okay, Jane, that was a long answer, but hopefully a helpful one. Let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay. All right. Catherine Toomer says, I think that that lack of exercise and feeling too cold are factors that make me so much more susceptible to symptoms. I'm thinking that there is a bit of TMS, that's tension myositis syndrome, as Sarno called the mind-body condition, when it gets out of whack. Specifically self-doubt. Once again, power column stuff, power column doubt. Cold and lack of exercise may affect all of us negatively, but I think I have given those factors too much power. I think you're 100% right, Catherine. I think mulling over what you said has helped me clarify that. Thank you. All right. So, Catherine, I think you nailed it. You're recognizing that you're giving such power to particular parts of your thought process. When we do that, they're more likely to cause symptoms. So I'm glad that brought you clarity. Catherine did add this. She said, the membership groups have increased my progress exponentially. I work at articulating my question, and just that action helps. Then all the more by sharing with the group and getting Dan and others' responses. It's wonderful. Catherine, thank you so much for the kind words. And, when I started out the membership groups, I, of course, wanted to be helpful. But you never know how these things are going to work. When I started out the seminars, they were helpful, but then people needed more ongoing work. That's why I started the groups. So then I started the groups and I thought, okay, let me make sure this is working. And I continue to tinker to make sure that things work. But Catherine, I appreciate you sharing your good experience there. Based on what I know, the members of the group are having a very good experience, and it's such a great group. It's just wonderful people. We all learn. Even I am learning from doing it. I learn a lot from the questions you guys ask. So I appreciate you all. And thanks for sharing that, Catherine. Okay. Casman Thibault, good to see you here. And we've got a question coming in from Jazz Sack Sailor. Okay. I have a power column question. I wrote my core narrative about a week ago. Pretty dark and traumatic, but on point, I think. I still feel sad and angry about it. How does this fit in the power column? Okay, as always, when I answer a question, follow it up with a question. And that could be here, or it could be in an email, or if you want to come to groups, you can ask me there. But make sure you follow up if I give you an answer, but it leaves you hanging or maybe leads to another question. Okay, so let's give this a try. First of all, let me explain what the core narrative is, especially for some of the newer people. In the power column, one of the main activities that I do, there's not that many things to do in each column. I try to keep it as simple and on point as possible. But in the power column, one of the two main things you do is to form what's called a core narrative. The other is to look for power and assess it and decide what to do about that. But we'll get into that another time. The core narrative is the story of your core suffering self. It is supposed to be about 3 sentences long. Sometimes they're very long sentences. And it is supposed to describe as accurately as possible and as starkly and darkly as possible what happened to you. And why is it supposed to be so extreme? Because otherwise we can't really access it. And when I say extreme, by the way, I don't mean an exaggeration. I'm not saying let's make it up or let's make it worse than it is. I'm saying Usually we're understating it. So we've got to make it extreme so that we can actually get to what it is. Sometimes you might say it in extreme form and say, no, that one needs to be dialed down. But what you're usually going to find is that it's not extreme enough. So, Jazz Sack Sailor, you're saying yours was pretty dark and traumatic, but on point, I think. I still feel sad and angry about it. Now, first, I'll get to your question in a second, but the first thing I want to say, when you say I still feel sad and angry about it, I want you to know, of course, I don't want you to be sad and angry, but I do want you to recognize that that is a sign that you did a good core narrative. The core narrative should either make you deeply sad or very angry, and often both. Why? Because generally speaking, our suffering was pretty serious, pretty bad. And what we need is time to sit with it. Now, let me talk about how the columns work in this regard. You asked, how does this fit in the power column? Let me answer that question first, and then I'll get to the columns in general. How does this fit in the power column? Well, first of all, this is the exact work you need to be doing. To be able to get into power, you need to know who you are. And knowing who you are, we all know ourselves fairly well. We know certain parts of ourselves anyway, or certain parts of our identity, but we often don't know our core suffering self that well. So this is an integration of that part of ourselves, which usually gets quarantined because we don't really want to know about it, or we don't want to spend too much time with it. Well, so I said there's two things to do in the power column. You write that core narrative and get in touch with who you really are, and that gets you to real self-empathy. But the second task is, in every moment, you can assess for power and see, am I in power? Did I lose power? Did I give it away? Did I finally get it back? Am I feeling good? You can assess for power, and you can make decisions based on that about what you need. Okay, so how does this fit into the power column? This is giving you the roadmap. You'll know not only more about when you're in power or not, but why and what happened. You're essentially getting to know yourself. Now, in a particular way, I think of the power column as high-speed therapy. I don't think of the columns as, they are therapeutic, but I don't think of them as therapy per se, because they're actually informational. It's mostly educational. It's mostly organization to get you so that your mind is thinking as it needs to be able to control symptoms, because however your mind is determines what happens. When it comes to what the columns do, the emotions column is to dip into to resolve onsets and upticks in symptoms, like what I was talking about with Karen or Jane. It's a tool to be used at a given moment. And within the emotions column, the main work is to build out your main emotional themes. So it's kind of like a menu to know where to look. And you just dip into it when you need it. But I don't think about the emotions column unless I'm having an onset or uptick. I don't really think about it that much. The doubt column is always on at a low hum, because doubt is so relentless and it's always trying to be there and trying to wreak havoc, that I'm always looking for it. But when I say it's on at a low hum, the reason I describe it that way is I don't have to think about it so ferociously. I just have to keep an eye out for it so that it doesn't fool me. But when it comes to the power column, symptoms are a little bit different that way. In the emotions column, when you discover what the emotion is and you really nail it, that symptom will just vanish. And we all hear stories about this, and then people say to me, well, why didn't my symptom vanish? Well, listen, if it's not an emotions column symptom, it's not likely to vanish. That's not the way symptoms work unless it is about emotions. There are plenty that are, but there are even more that aren't. In the doubt column, you've got these symptoms that seem unbreakable. When you start to make progress in the doubt column, what's going to happen is that starts to break up. They start to shift around. You might get a new symptom. An old symptom might start to lessen or come and go. It starts to change. So success in the emotions column is the symptom vanishes. Success in the doubt column is the symptom moves. Success in the power column is that you feel it emotionally. You feel it and you sit with it. And I'm not saying you're going to sit with it forever at all. But typically speaking, when you get in touch with a power column symptom or the information from the power column, it helps you get in touch with things. Let me back up for a sec. I didn't actually say this earlier, and it's important to clarify this. The columns not only describe 3 different types of symptoms, but they happen for 3 different symptom functions. In the emotions column, the function is distraction. The physical symptom is there to keep you from discovering the emotion. Distraction is the key function. In the doubt column, the key function is doubt just wants to spread itself out so that it can keep protecting you. I'll put in quotes. It's not actually protecting you. It's often making things worse, but it thinks it's protecting you. It's like, hey, look out for this. Look out for this. It's kind of like a helicopter parent who's saying, well, got to worry about this and this and this. But often it's not helpful, right? So if we disable the emotions column distraction, that's why it goes away. If we disable doubt's need to just solidify itself all over the place and help it become assured, I'm not worried about what you're saying I should worry about, it calms down and stops trying to protect us. But in the power column, the function of the symptoms is to help you receive a communication. It wants to tell you something about how you've suffered. So the core narrative is the receiving activity. It is the activity that allows you to receive the information. But once you receive the information, success in the power column or good work in the power column usually leads to sitting with the symptom the feeling for a little bit. Because the job is to receive the communication. Well, generally speaking, we don't receive a communication very well if we just experience it for 30 seconds and then forget about it. A lot of times you got to really think about it. It's a deep processing, and this is going to help you. That was a very long answer, Jazz Zach Sailor, but that's because there's a lot of information in it. Let me know if that made sense to you. Let's do follow-up questions as needed. Okay. Casman Thibault says, where can we hop on the memberships? Okay, so you can go to www.crushingdoubt.org, and there are links at the top of the screen. One is the membership link. I also, you know what, I can just put it in the chat here. Oh, but you're on Instagram. I was going to put it in the YouTube chat. I don't have an easy way to do it on Instagram. So I'll tell you what, just go to the website, or you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. I'll send you the link. But right there, you can just sign up for them. You can join either once, twice, or 3 times a week, depending on how involved you want to start out. But I'll answer these questions, and I love doing it in group because I can do exactly what I'm doing here, but it's even better because you might say, wait, hold on, what did you mean by that? You get the information you need more there, and I get the information I need more to help you there even better. Nothing against this Q&A. It's wonderful, but the groups are like 10 times what you get here, and that's great. Okay, Casman, I see you said thank you, and I'm so glad. I always look forward to working with people, and I want to get people relief. I endured 8 years of this myself. I know what it's like, and it's not fair, and it's also totally unnecessary if people can understand it. But much to my surprise, nobody understood it like I was understanding it, so that's why I'm here telling people about it. Okay, Christina Collins says, excellent answer. Thank you so much, Christina. Now I'm going to get to your question. I got to answer your question. Okay, Christina says, my husband and I were doing errands. Nice day. Then sudden excruciating nerve pain in the top of my ankle. Is this emotions? It's still going on in the ankle. What could this be? Then she says, hi, Dan. Group is amazing. Thank you, Christina. She's another great group member. And love working with you, Christina. So thanks so much. And thank you for the kind words. So here's what I would say. As always, though, even with people who know me well and are in the group, follow up with questions. No matter how well I know you or no matter how well you know me, there's going to be times where I'll answer a question and there needs to be follow-up because I didn't quite get it. So I'm going to give this a try. So sudden excruciating nerve pain in the top of your ankle. I mentioned something about this before. There are 2 reasons for the onset of a symptom. Usually it's going to be emotions column, but there is one other type of onset, and that is a doubt trigger, something in the environment that gets you worried about something. So Christina, I know you well enough to know you're going to be pretty vulnerable to doubt triggers. So I don't actually know yet which it is, but those are the 2 things I'd be looking at. So as an example, if you suddenly started to run and then that happened, that sounds maybe like a doubt trigger. Now, here's the trickiest part. A lot of times when you're having an unconscious emotion and the psychological mind-body defense is looking for a way to fool you, it'll wait for a plausible physical condition to pounce on to enact that symptom. So it can be a mix of the two on top of it. I will say this, though, knowing you as I do, I think what this was, unless you're going to tell me that there was a doubt trigger, some kind of clear physical event that you were worried about, then I do think that this was emotional. If there was no clear trigger, I would look at emotions. And by the way, you could be having the best day of your life, totally unaware of it. That only fits more with it being an emotions column symptom, because emotions column symptoms are unconscious. And meanwhile, you can even have emotions column symptoms about good things. You could be feeling good and then think, maybe this is going to go away. Ah, my ankle. It can suddenly get you. What I want to encourage you, Christina, and everybody else, you make sense and your symptoms make sense at any given moment. Whatever happened there, I promise you we can make sense of it. There is a way to understand it. The columns provide that way to understand it. I will continue to interpret those columns for you, but I would be looking for the emotion that started this. Then we know, and I mean this with this is totally said in a loving way, Christina, but you are a very talented doubter, and you're going to end up doubting almost no matter what happens still, even though your doubt is way down from where it was. So when doubt is there, first bring down the doubt. What I want you to do is say to yourself, okay, wait a minute. This was a sudden onset. There was nothing to explain it. It's got to be emotions. Let's go looking for it. If that effectively brings the doubt down enough, then you can go do that emotional work. What I can do for you about this, Christina, since we're a bit low on time in this Q&A, and I also don't get the give and take unless you want to pose another question quickly now, is I want to get at the specifics of this. This is another thing that we can do in group that we can't do here, is I can say, wait a minute, what was going on that day? Describe it. And, Christina or whoever's telling me the story might start to tell me the details, and I might have an instinct or notice, wait a minute, what was happening there? This is one of the reasons the groups are so good, is I can get more information from you, and you can get more information from me. So what I'd want you to do, Christina, and we can talk about it in group tomorrow if you're going to be there, is what was going on there. And sometimes I'm so surprised. Listen, unconscious emotions that lead to symptoms, they always are surprising. We aren't aware of them. So I can be having a symptom when I'm like, I'm totally fine. Here's a story. My brother is an author, and he had just written a new book and wanted me to see a draft of it. And I was happy about this. I tend to like a lot of what he writes, and he's a very talented writer, and he was being generous and sharing it with me. And it was this nice moment. And I started feeling not well. And I was like, what is up? So I took my body at its word. That's what I want you to do here, Christina. Take your body at its word. What I realized is that his previous book had been upsetting to me in a certain way. And I was unconsciously like, I'm not ready to turn the page on the other book, to use a pun. But I didn't know. So my body expressed it and said, something was happening here. Could have been something in the interaction with your husband. Could have been something that happened internally with you. Could have been something you saw. We can discover this. And even if we can't discover this one, the symptoms will all go away as long as you don't let doubt control things. That's the only thing that keeps it in place. So don't worry about that. But if we just practice discovering the link between a certain emotion and symptoms, that not only is going to allow you to control the symptoms, it's also going to bring doubt way down when you see these links. It's incredibly important. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Christina. Please do let me know. Okay, Jane Smith says, thanks. In those situations, I was very aware of my choices. I feel conflicted by conflicting desires and needs. So just to remind everybody, what we had been talking about was this. Jane said that she was confused about what to do in these tension-inducing situations. For example, driving or overstimulating social interactions. So now she's saying, in those situations, I was very aware of my choices, but I feel conflicted by conflicting desires and needs. Okay. And then she said, so I'm thinking it is actually a power column issue. Okay. So yes, Jane, you have that right. This is one of those things where, in a Q&A, I don't necessarily have all the information. I'm hearing a symptom started. But because you are sharing that you were aware of your choices, Um, that does, and it was more about a conflict of desires and needs. That does actually sound more power column. Now, let me say this. The doubt column is a column that is entirely dominated by thinking, but the emotions and power column are actually both emotional columns. The emotions column is about emotions of the moment that don't connect to a broader picture. The power column is about emotions that are broader, all about you and your the way you choose to live. So, Jane, with more information, yes, I agree with you. There probably was some kind of specific emotional thing that drove the symptoms up in the first place, but it's related to this conflict. And by the way, your awareness of yourself is moving you in the right direction of discovering what that is. Okay, Jane, I hope that made sense to you. Guys, it has been a pleasure as always. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. This has been a pleasure as always. So, guys, here's what we can do to go forward. On Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, that's when I'm here for this Q&A, because I want everyone to have the resources to at least be able to ask their questions. And I'm going to answer them, hopefully to your satisfaction, as much as possible. But don't give up even if I don't give you an answer you want as fully. Ask again. Send me an email, dan@crushingdoubt.org. Check out my seminars or membership groups on www.crushingdoubt.org. There are resources for this. You need to be relentless in getting your answers, and I am going to be relentless in giving them if you will allow it. So Eulalia has just joined us on Instagram. I'm sorry that you're joining just at the last minute here, but I hope you'll join again next week. It's Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. These are for mind-body conditions to find out how you can master these symptoms and feel better. And I have a system to do that. So I'm happy to explain that to you. And if you want to talk to me directly before then, you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. Rita says, thanks, Dan. It is good to see you here, Rita. She's a great mind-body coach and an ally in the field. So good to see you. And Jane says, thanks as always. It is my pleasure, Jane. I look forward to seeing you guys again, same time next week. And please do let me know how I can be of help. You're not alone. We can make sense of your symptoms. There are things we can do, and the columns will help. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all. Take care.